I came across this quote the other day, which I really rather liked. Reform, aren't things bad enough already, said the Duke of Wellington. Reform is not necessarily a good business to be in, particularly in these times, as people have suggested, but I think it's the business we're in inevitably if we're passionate about the state of citizenship and state of our society. I'm going to say a little bit about the centre as a whole. Why was it set up? What's it about? Where is it going? And then we're going to do a series of very short, sharp presentations about some of the different things we've been involved in, some of the different ideas we're proposing, and then hopefully leave enough time for questions. I think one of the things that the Centre for Welfare Reform thinks about the current welfare system is that it is not a poverty trap but a poverty net. A third of households in this country actually live in benefit dependency. But it's not just people who are poor and reliant on benefits who are really part of this poverty net. If you look at the way the system is organised, it's really a series of kind of complex taxes and complex benefits. And when you look at the impact of those interlocked taxes and benefits, which nobody understands in the whole, nobody can actually explain the whole system anymore, it's become so complex. But when you look at the impact of those systems, it discourages citizenship. It discourages earning, it discourages saving, it discourages people from being in control of their own lives and building decent lives for themselves. It's also a deeply paternalistic system. And there are reasons for this. And some of these reasons are good and they're to do with our history, and some of these reasons are not so good. But largely, most of the welfare system is set up on this kind of professional gift model, where it's assumed that it's really effectively doling out things to the poor, needy people who need them. And this is wrong. We don't need to organise things like this. It's not helpful to our community, it's not helpful to our collective citizenship. We can move to a model of citizenship where people are in control of the decisions about their lives, the decisions about their families, and where they engage productively and actively with their communities. And, of course, there's a lot of controversy here, but I don't think all the solutions, at least things that would make very, very significant improvements, are that unclear or obscure. There is no reason for having a separated tax and benefit system other than to stigmatise the people who receive benefits. So a very straightforward reform would be to integrate tax and benefits and take the stigma out of the benefit system. You could then start engineering in what we need, which is a guaranteed minimum income for families. It doesn't seem to me at all hard to believe that in large areas of life, not just social care where I've worked, but also in education and in healthcare and in work, people should be in control of much more. Most of the funding spent on those kind of services could be in the control of families or individuals or citizens. And it's not at all clear why the welfare state has been set up without any real clear constitutional guarantees or rights. We know why in this country we're uncomfortable with the term constitution. I don't necessarily mean it has to be a written US or French type constitution, but we need systems that we can rely on, at least for the medium to long term, not systems that are just going to be changed every 2 or 3 years, which is the case with the NHS, just because that suits the next set of junior ministers who come into power. And we need, surely, in a country of over 60 million people, to have some decent systems of local governance and local control, and we need to make sense of our local communities in a more sensible way. I recently been talking to folk in Barnsley who've been very keen to explore what it might mean for Barnsley to have more control over its own destiny. But at a seminar in London at the RSA, somebody said, Barnsley, they can't look after themselves, they need Chelsea. You know, well, as a northerner, that upset me, obviously. But I went away and looked up what the population of Barnsley was. It's 250,000 people. I then went away and looked up what the population of Athens at the peak of the Athenian civilization. It was 250,000 people. 250,000 people is enough to have one of the most civilized societies in the world. So unless these guys at the RSA are telling me northerners are just incapable of civilization, we don't lack enough people. So it seems to me strange that we disempowered our communities in the way we have. So the solutions may be clear to me, perhaps alone, or clear to a few of us. But resistance is inevitable. As Phil suggests, the public themselves are confused and suspicious of the language of reform, and attempts at reform always become associated with anything negative that people see. Producers, in their many different forms, are obviously threatened by accountability. You know, it seems easier often to get a big chunk of money from government than to get money from citizens. Politicians of the left and the right enjoy their patronage of the welfare state. So they actually enjoy doling out benefits that, of course, spending our money for us. And civil servants are supreme experts in protecting the status quo, even when they themselves are declaring reform. So how can we bring about change? How will change happen if the case for change still needs to be made, and many of the people making the case, or who are officially in that position, actually have a different agenda? How will change happen if we really need to involve people, if we need to involve citizens in making the change happen? How will change happen if we do need more thought, research and debate in order to properly understand what's required? And if we need action, experiment, innovation? Well, my theory 18 months ago was that we needed to create a community of people who were passionate about change, thoughtful, practical, and committed to some simple values. And I think Phil actually has characterised the centre well. But I would add a couple of other things about values that Phil didn't touch on. I think if you touch the people who are part of the centre and say, what are you really passionate about? They're passionate about human equality. And they're passionate about the value of human diversity. Many of us actually spend our lives working with people who are a bit different, need stuff, need a bit of help maybe. But what we know is those people add a lot more than they need to our societies if we're prepared to recognise it. So a lot of these ideas are really rooted in not abstract notions of citizenship or some kind of vague political ideology, but they're rooted in the experience of engaging with those folk who are most at risk of being badly treated by the welfare state. And I think it's that fact that gives a lot of the passion to the Centre for Welfare Reform. So what the centre is a growing community of fellows. There's a big debate about whether we should use the word fellows, but I looked up the word fellow in my very big English dictionary, which I got as a birthday present from my dad. So it doesn't mean chap particularly, or man. It means somebody going on a journey together, or an equal. So it seemed quite a good word, really. And although one of the fellows was I think really rather disturbed at being patronised by being given a fellowship by me, he eventually took it, and I think he was mostly upset because he'd been a genuine fellow of somewhere proper. But nevertheless, people, I think, have accepted that, and it reflects the spirit of equality, of a shared journey, but also a celebration of effort and innovation. You know, people are awarded fellowships. There's no price to it, there's no contract, there's no deal. All you're doing, all the centre's doing, is recognising the fact that these folk have made real contributions. The centre is also a source of, a hub to innovation. I don't believe, as I've heard some of the folk who left the New Labour government, people, well, I won't name them, but there are plenty of folk who will talk powerfully about social innovations and their value, but I think often what they're really reflecting on is their failure to bring about reform in the previous New Labour administration. Their failure to address deeper issues of legislation and rights and financing. And so what they've done after the fact is then say, well, actually, that's too difficult. You can't really do that. What you've got to do is create canny little social innovations. And they're partly right and partly wrong. You can always innovate. In even the most difficult circumstances, you can innovate. And in fact, difficulties create innovations. But also those innovations illuminate where you need even more profound and radical change. And that's what the Centre for Welfare Reform is really about. It's connecting innovation and the practical business of making people's lives better to what would it be like if we could organise a society that just wasn't as stupid as ours sometimes is. Yeah? What would it be like if we actually as a default gave disabled people, say, an amount of money that was adequate for them to get on with their lives without having to create a complex workaround the current system. And with those innovations we share what we learn. Almost everything is just given away, published in high quality publications that are freely available through the internet. I don't know whether the centre would really even exist if we didn't have the internet. Our ability to communicate effectively and freely without relying on huge patronage or big government grants is really because of the internet, which allows us to connect with fellow citizens, fellow practitioners, cheaply and easily. And the centre, I think, is trying to work quietly. This is perhaps a noisy day relative for us, but work quietly without fuss, without competition. Phil kindly puts us alongside Demos et al., but I don't quite see us quite like that, although I understand the comparison. I don't think we're in the same business, although obviously what we're trying to do is similar in a way. What we're doing is underpinned by very clear values. We have a mission around those values. We're not a think tank just to think in, and I don't even know why anybody would think in a tank. I never found it particularly useful. I notice some people now are doing do tanks. You certainly can't do in a tank, folks. I mean, they're just not good for connecting with reality. So we have strong, powerful values that we believe in. Research and development seems to be a better description of what we're trying to do. Find out how to do good stuff, do different stuff, share it. And share it as a network of partners and fellows, and hopefully increasing numbers of subscribers, people who want to find out more. And at the centre of that is a very, very tiny hub, a very tiny business model that doesn't require any subsidy. Everything that we do and give away is given away pro bono on the back of work that we go out and earn. So there's no subsidy, there's no patronage, there's just hard work and sweat and a lot of support from a lot of really good people. And that, when I was thinking about the Centre for Welfare Reform, I thoroughly recommend, if you haven't read him, Lao Tzu's, is it Tao Te Ching? But it's a very good book on Taoism. But he talks about doing good work and lie low, and there are a lot of thoughts there, I think, about one of the challenges here. One of the things that really undermines good things, I think, is, and so this is a real struggle for me, I'm not trying to suggest I'm very good at it, but it's the suppression of ego. One of the things that really kills the development of anything good is the ego, the desire that it be yours. I think what the Centre is trying to do is just say, this is ours. This stuff is invented by us, shared by us, and we do it as fellow citizens. And in a sense, if we're going to live up to that aspiration of citizenship, we all need to start behaving as citizens with our different gifts and with our different capacities.